Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1162, 1162, Monday, June the 15th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the news of the last 24 hours and then we'll get into the dumbass of the week. Alrighty, so I don't know how many of you know this, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with Cheryl Atkinson, who's a former ABC reporter, was with ABC for a very long time. She's been independent now for about 10 years. As you know, some of you may know, she has a pending lawsuit against the Department of Justice and the FBI for spying on her. She has hard evidence that they got into her computer and were basically keylogging her and spying on her through her computer. And she's got the hard evidence to prove it. Now, in her lawsuit names the primary person as being the one who gave the order to conduct the spying, who approved on it, who signed off on it, was Rodenstein. Rod Rodenstein, when he was the top U.S. attorney in the District of Maryland. Before he became, the deputy AG, he was the top attorney over in the District of Maryland, which is where he signed off on and approved of the spying on Cheryl Atkinson. Now, Chris Henry of CrowdStrike is also named in that lawsuit. And this has been dragging on for quite some time. Honestly, this has been 4 or 5 years, I think, that she's been on this. But I think it's slowly moving itself along. I don't know if she'll ever get a resolution to it or if she's just trying to draw attention to it. But anyway, just so you do know that this lawsuit with Cheryl Atkinson, the primary person, the number one person who is at the top of the list of people she has a grievance against is, of course, Rodenstein. And of course, Rodenstein no longer works for the Department of Justice. He works down at that same law firm. He works at the same law firm down there now with Silly Sally Yates, where Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray came from. So if you're a deep stater, anti-Trumper, and your job at the DOJ comes to an end, I guess you go on down to this law firm in Atlanta where all the anti-Trumpers are and you get a job there. Because that's where he's currently working, right alongside Silly Sally and a bunch of other. You can look at the list of ex-DOJ Obama-era anti-Trump lawyers, and you'll see quite a few of them work at that law firm. And now Rodenstein works there. And he is the top primary target in the lawsuit against the DOJ by Cheryl Atkinson for spying on her. And this was going back, this happened quite a few years ago, over 5. So this just tells you that this routine that Rodenstein tried to put on, where in those hearings where he pretends that he would have been appalled or that he wouldn't have signed off on these warrants and it was illegal, unauthorized spying and all this kind of stuff. Believe me, as I told you the day after his testimony, he is a liar. This guy is total 100% deep state. And he had no problem whatsoever signing off on spying on Cheryl Atkinson because she is a conservative reporter and she was reporting on things. And I'll tell you, you go back 3.5, 4 years, she was focusing very, very hard on Ukraine and the origins of Spygate, and she brings all back to Ukraine. And there's no question that Ukraine was a major player in the original origins of getting the Trump-Russia narrative going. And she focuses a lot on that, but there's a lot of other things that she goes into that are not so much associated to Spygate. And I've talked about it from time to time, wherever there's places where there's some bleed over into Spygate. But she did a much, much larger dive into Ukraine. And obviously it bleeds into the stuff that was going on with Chalupa and corrupt Ukrainian officials and Obama people. But she goes way back with Ukraine on this particular dive that she does and gets into a lot of other things that are not even related to Spygate. But so there's no question she's a conservative journalist, and she was targeted, unlawfully spied on And it was Rodenstein who signed off on it. So the idea that he's, somehow surprised or perplexed or unhappy of the spying that went on in the Trump campaign is bullshit. This guy is up to it in his eyeballs. And as I said, his testimony isn't the end of the road for Rodenstein. That's just his testimony. There are going to be many other witnesses that are going to come forward in the Graham hearings, in the Ron Johnson hearings, and certainly I'm sure that in Durham's investigation, he's probably already interviewed many people who, certainly McCabe, I don't know if he interviewed him yet, but he eventually will, I assume. McCabe, Baker, Page, and there were a couple others who were in those meetings or knew about the meetings where Rodenstein brought up wearing a wire in the 25th Amendment. So there's many other things, and whether or not he knew about all this, he signed off on those scope memos. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't seem to have any problem at all signing off on these warrants, despite the fact that as spying on the sitting president, his boss, spying on what would have been the incoming national security advisor. I mean, signing off on all this stuff, asking no questions, not curious at all. So just keep your eyes peeled for this. There's a lot more coming down the road. A lot more to learn about Rodenstein. Definitely not a white hat. Definitely not a white hat. I'll tell you that right now. Well, we have New York Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo threatening state enforcement action against New York citizens for engaging in economic activity. If you're violating social distancing rules, not wearing masks, and having parties, law enforcement in New York will be coming after you. Now, you can go ahead and do other things. You can do some rioting. You can do some looting. You can carry out arson. You can do the entire thing, and you'll be fine. No problem there. But do not engage. If you're a bar or restaurant owner of trying to operate your business, you will lose your liquor license. If you're caught with an open container standing outside of one of these establishments, you will be fined. If you are a cop or a protester and you're not wearing a mask, you could be fined, but you probably won't be. Unless you own a business and are trying to make a living. Then you will likely be shut down or lose your license. So there you go, Governor Cuomo. And people actually considering this guy as a serious contender for president someday? I don't think so. Him and de Blasio together, the mess they have made of the coronavirus, of everything else going on with the riots in New York, has been a complete disaster. You can only hope that the people of New York recognize this and take necessary action. Although he's a governor, I think he was just elected. I know he's not up this time, but whether or not people will remember this when he is up for re-election, or whether they'll forget, I don't know. But my guess is that I would see Cuomo as probably someone who will be running for president in 2024. That's my guess. But we will see. So I'm watching. I was going through some videos, and I stumbled onto the old video from the Benghazi hearings when Trey Gowdy is questioning the rotten Reverend Clinton. And I'd forgotten what was actually probably the most biting or damaging part of the Benghazi hearings. And it was actually that 10 minutes or so when Trey Gowdy, and I think there was actually 2 segments he did where he's questioning the rotten Reverend Clinton, and he's on the Benghazi issue. Of course, that's what the hearings were about. But it's when he specifically dialed in on Sidney Blumenthal. And there's a lot of things that he brings up and that the rotten Reverend Clinton is forced to admit to in terms of her relationship with Blumenthal and what a relationship is with him, what he does for her and has done for the Clintons over the years. And, I'd forgotten about that because something tells me that we're going to find out, as I've been saying for a very long time, that Clinton's people, her inner circle of people, I think were a lot more involved in propagating the Spygate conspiracy than what is currently known. We know that Michael Sussman was key in being sort of an intermediary between the Clinton campaign, the FBI, and the CIA. And we know that Shearer and Blumenthal, Shearer had his own little dossier, which he was spreading around using Blumenthal and the State Department official Jonathan Weiner to move that through the State Department. We know that both had visited the State Department in the summer of 2016, pushing their garbage. And I think we're going to find, remember, Sidney Blumenthal is really Hillary's main henchman. And just about every endeavor that she's involved in, she brings in Blumenthal to take care of the dirty business. So there's no question that he would have had a fairly big role to play in the plot in 2016. But so far, he's just kind of out there in the peripheral. But I think we're going to find out that he was more of a player than what we know. And of course, everybody's wanting to know who this Steele's primary subsource was. And I think it's, at this point, most people believe it's Melion. The description seems to describe Melion. But I wouldn't be surprised to find out if it's someone like Halper. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But I also would not be surprised to find out that Sidney Blumenthal was somehow in the mix. He knows the Confusion GPS people, Simpson and all those people. He's Hillary's #1 henchman. We know he was an intermediary between Weiner, Shearer, and the State Department to move the information through there. And of course, we know about his other relationships. And if you watch that video of Trey Gowdy questioning the Right Reverend Clinton and taking her to task over all these communications and directions she was getting from Blumenthal, when he had actually, as Trey Gowdy was reminding Clinton that the reason he wasn't officially a member of her State Department is because Obama would not allow it. And Trey Gowdy is actually going through emails from Blumenthal to Hillary where he is bad-mouthing Obama because of something he's trying to get done in Libya. Clearly, there was some sort of a business arrangement. There was some money-making scam that Blumenthal was trying to do in Libya. And it doesn't get aired totally out because that's not the subject of the questioning. But it's there, and you hear Gowdy asking her about it. And the Rotten Reverend doesn't ever go down that road. She dances around that pretty much. And gives pretty much non-answer answers is what is typically the practice of the Rotten Reverend. But it just kind of reminded me watching that video of how deeply connected Blumenthal and Hillary are. Hillary doesn't do hardly anything without Blumenthal having his fingers in it. And he does the dirty work. And there's always dirty work in a Hillary Clinton situation. No matter what she does, there's always dirty work. And Blumenthal is the guy who does it. So, again, I do believe that we're going to find out that people around Hillary in her inner circle, primarily Blumenthal, had a much bigger role to play in the coup than what we currently know. What if he turns out to be Steele's subsource? Don't put it past him. Believe me. It's somebody, whoever it is, it's somebody, it's very, very damaging to somebody. Because, they are holding on to that information as tight as they can. Horowitz redacted it in his report. All these members of Congress been trying to get that name. It hasn't been declassified and released by Grinnell. So far, not by Ratcliffe. Chris Wray won't give that information out to any of the committees investigating now. There's something about this primary subsource of Christopher Steele that they are trying to protect the name of this person more than probably anything in this entire investigation. And that tells us it must be someone who's very damaging to either the FBI, the DOJ, the intel community, the foreign government, or the Rotten Reverend Clinton herself. And eventually we're going to find out. I mean, Durham's investigation, when it comes to an end, that's going to be a key person to identify what their role was. I mean, I think we're ultimately are going to find that out, and that could be a huge bombshell. We know it is clearly because of the way that they're acting to protect this person and cover that up. So the last couple of, I guess that last week or so, week and a half, been hearing a lot of talk about is there a possible military coup underway? I mean, they've tried everything else, right? They've tried everything else. Why not a military coup? And 5 years ago, if you'd have said that to me, I would have laughed and said, no, there's not going to be any military coup. That's impossible. But the state of affairs that we currently find ourselves in now, I still say it's a very low probability. Not that they wouldn't try it or want to do it. Oh, I'm sure they do. But getting away with it, that would be hard. But I can foresee or imagine a scenario whereby they run a propaganda campaign on Trump where he wins the 2020 election, and then they come out with a conspiracy program saying that he cheated, and they throw up some fake evidence, and they give it to their friends in the media who blow it up and fan the flames. And then they send their foot soldiers out to the streets, which we can see. They can put a lot of people on the streets. They start rioting. They start doing all the things that we see them doing now, demanding President Trump step down. And that pressure would be used to force the military joint chiefs to say, yeah, Mr. President, you got to go. The country's, imploding because they think that you cheated an election. It may or may not be true, but just for the good of the country, we think that you have to be taken out. So, I mean, I could see where they might devise a plot like that. I have, 5 years ago, I would have laughed at that, but now I wouldn't laugh at that at all. I wouldn't doubt what they do have plans for all sorts of contingencies if Trump wins, or if it looks like he's going to win. I'm absolutely certain that they're not going to let the election just go off without a hitch and accept defeat. If I believe Trump's going to win, and I believe that when he wins, it doesn't matter what happens. Regardless, once Trump wins re-election, there's absolutely going to be massive propaganda campaigns to try to delegitimize his second victory as well. And that's why I say it is so important that Barr and Durham finish their work before the end of the convention, certainly before the November election. They cannot allow us to go into another election without exposing the truth about what happened in the previous 4-year election 4 years ago. It must be known to every person in this country, whether they accept it or believe it or not, that there was an attempted coup against the president by the previous administration. And that the whole Russia thing was a hoax. It was a plot. This absolutely must be known to everyone in the country, and it must be beyond just a report or something like that. There has to be criminal indictments of the people who were involved. It must be 100% crystal clear of what happened in 2016. This is absolutely critical. If that does not happen, then the possibility of success for some type of a conspiratorial plot to remove Trump after he wins re-election could very well succeed. That is why Barr and Durham absolutely must finish their investigation before the conventions are over, before the general election begins, which is generally accepted to be the day after Labor Day, is when the general election is. Typically that's when people say it's really serious at that point. It's kicked off. It actually is when the nominees are known. Once the nominees are known, it's pretty much on. But officially, I guess, it's generally considered the campaign season for the general election really is September and after Labor Day. So it's absolutely crucial that Barr and Durham wrap up their investigation, indict the people who were involved in committing crimes, and there's a bunch of them. That absolutely must happen, or there's a real danger because that will certainly suck the life out of a lot of any potential plots. It will cool the jets on a lot of these people, hit them in the gut with a 200-pound medicine ball. It will knock them back on their feet. It will daze them and dizzy them, piss them off, no question, and all that sort of stuff. But you cannot let these people roll into another election cycle with this narrative still hanging out there. It allowed them to win the House in 2018. It could allow them to win the Senate in 2020. Could cost Trump the election. So they absolutely must, 100% must, expose the plot and indict the people who were involved in it. And that must happen before we begin the general election cycle. Or yes, I think there will be you're opening the door for something really ugly to go down. And I hope Barr knows this. I mean, I hope he understands this. I don't know, but I'm guessing. Now, this was further exacerbated when Biden was recently on I think it was Trevor Noah, and he said that he will use military force to remove Trump from the White House if Trump loses and refuses to leave. So they're already putting the narrative out there that Trump is going to lose, and if he refuses to leave, they're going to use the military to remove him. So they're already putting the narrative, they're already putting it out there that Trump is going to refuse to leave if he loses. And it's possible they have a plan to rig the election to make sure he does. I'm sure they have many plans to rig the elections that they always do. But I think there's probably also an element of that is even if Trump wins, they probably have a plot to say that he cheated and that he must go and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's wide open. I can tell you this. They are not going to accept another Trump victory in 2020 regardless of how clean the elections are. It doesn't matter. I'm telling you, when Trump is reelected again here in about 5 months, they're not just going to accept it. They're going to be right out there hitting the streets, rioting. We're going to get all this all over again in November after Trump wins. They'll be rioting in the streets, saying he rigged the election, he cheated, he was working with the Russians, you name it. They're never, ever going to accept Trump's presidency, his legitimacy, or anything else. And it's going to be pure hell for the entire 4 years. That's why you've absolutely got to put these people down. And the way you put them down is by exposing the crimes they committed in 2016, 17, and 18, and still working today on those plots. So it's absolutely critical that this happen. We, of course, had Lara Logan doing her story, writing that story she did last week of how Stanley McChrystal, Trump hater, is working with ex-CIA people to conduct information warfare against the president. And, of course, it should be noted, many of you who are in the military know this, is that generals are under they fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice even after they are retired. The Uniform Code of Military Justice. And the Uniform Code of Military Justice does prohibit using contemptuous words against a president. Using contemptuous words against a president is a violation. It's a crime under the UCMJ, even if you are a retired general. So these guys are all in violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That would include Mark Milley, who I would have already fired by now. That would include Mattis, Powell, McRaven, Allen, McCaffrey, Mullen, and McChrystal. And there's probably more. All those individuals can be brought up on charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And I would do it. Well, I would fire Milley, first of all. Mark Milley, I would fire him immediately. And then I would go to my chairman and my Joint Chiefs of Staff and verify, in fact, that this is true, that under the UCMJ, these guys cannot be out there saying contemptuous words against the sitting president. He would, of course, acknowledge that that is true, and I would tell him that he needs to advise all these former generals of that fact, and that if they persist, that they will be charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and prosecuted for their crimes. We're not going to have any military coups in the country. That needs to be made clear to these turncoats. And, of course, they're very upset because most of these generals, when they retire, they immediately go to work for defense contractors. They become war salesmen, for which the commissions are quite high. And Trump is, of course, taking away their commissions. He's pulled 9,000 troops out of Germany. He's pulling the troops out of Iraq. He's going to be pulling troops out of Afghanistan, Syria, and he's not planning on launching any more wars. and therefore there's no arms to sell for any wars. He's taking money out of these guys' pocket. Money that they planned for 30 or 40 years. This is how generals cash in. This is how generals cash in. And he's taking away the candy, basically. And that's why they want him gone. Simple as that. It's money. Purely about money for these guys. Dumbass of the week. Net is going to go with No Joe and his handlers. Larry Rydell is going to go with the World Health Organization, first admitting that they were running a scam, and then the next day taking it back. JoJo is going to go with anyone who thinks becoming a commie is cool. Good Old School is going to go with the warlord, Raz Simone. Yeah, I think he got caught with some old tweets. He's not doing so well these days. Gene Alley. Gene is going to go with anyone who bowed down to BLM, the Seattle Summer of Love mayor, Jackass, and of course, General Milley. Very good picks there for Gene, as usual. Joe Max is going to go with the Demo Commie Party. Jonathan Cassidy is going to go with Sullivan and Company. Barisma Joe and the Liberal Mayors and Rioters. Yep, covered pretty much the full gamut of the week right there. Jenny Tweets will go with Black Lives Matter and Judge Sullivan. Gitmo Holiday will go with the Kneelers and Foot Kissers. The Soy Gardeners. They're not very good soy gardeners, by the way. Their garden is pitiful. And, of course, people using .22 caliber instead of 9mm. That's true. 9mm is a much better upgrade from a .22, but personally, I'm a big fan of the 40 cal. The 40 cal is my weapon of choice. I like the 40 cal. But, yeah, 9mm are good, too. I have a Browning. Keith Fellows, Black Lives Matter ×3. Peter James will go with the Seattle mayor. Also, the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee. He's a real piece of work. And the Kneeling Dems. You know, Peter James has got to have one hell of a good sense of humor out there in the Great Northwest, living in a state where you have a mayor like Inslee, a governor like Inslee, and a mayor like this nut Jenny Durkin. That's a wild pair you got out there, my friend. You've absolutely got to have a good sense of humor to live in the state of Washington these days. Douglas is going to go with Judge Wilkins, Singing Mike. Hey, that's right, he's me. Douglas is going to go with Judge Wilkins and me. I guess he didn't like my singing on that video I did. I wasn't really trying to promote my singing. It was the idea of the Summer of Love. And when I hear that term, that's the song I think about. Because when I was a little kid, I would hear that song on the radio all the time when all the peaceniks and the beatniks were all around. That's the song I remember. Sticks out of my mind. Come on, people now. Smile on your brother. Everybody get together. Love one another right now. It's like the ultimate Summer of Love peace anthem, I guess, in my mind. But apparently Douglas did not like my singing. Well, guess what, Douglas? I don't like my singing either. That's why I don't do it very much. Okay, and also Douglas is also going to go with the USA Passport Office. Well, at least the cruise lines are off Douglas's shit list for the time being. But boy, the Passport Office, he's obviously got it in for them. They have a history, don't they, Douglas? Let's go back to 9/11 and talk about the Passport Office and the scenario, the things that were going on there. But we don't have time, so we'll just go next to Stage Door Johnny. He's going to go with the Circuit Court. Yes, they did a pretty pitiful job, in my opinion. The Seattle mayor and the pandering Dems. Joey D will go with BuzzFeed and Yahoo in the media in general. Of course, it was BuzzFeed and Yahoo who really got the propaganda started. They were essentially on the Reverend Clinton payroll. Perk Dog will go with the Seattle mayor, Jenny Durkin. Friend of Liberty will go with the mayor of Seattle, Raz, the emperor of Chaz, and Biden with his face diaper hanging from his ear. Yeah, that was a very cringy little press conference he did there with the thing hanging from his ear, and then he literally lost track of what he was saying. It's like, I don't know. Oh man, that was bad. Fern is going to go with the Chazers in their topsoil garden. You're right, Fern. That is the most pitiful garden I've ever seen. I don't think they're going to be able to feed the hordes with that mess that they call a garden of topsoil on top of cardboard. I don't think that's going to work very well, but we'll see. I don't think that Chaz has much of a future. If you ask me, I don't think that they'll be around very much longer. Andreas Manuela is going to go with the protesters choking a Christian pastor. We all saw that on video, and then they robbed him, I believe, after that. And of course, the mayors who are defunding cops, and of course, Andrew Cuomo. Birdwell is going to go with blacks that support the Dems so that they can stay on the plantation. That's absolutely correct. 100% correct. That was the whole reason. Go back and listen to Lyndon Johnson, the tapes, the recordings. We have them from the Johnson Library, where on multiple occasions he is discussing as he's trying to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and he's talking with all these people. He's trying to get them to vote, talking with people, and he constantly brings up this issue of, we passed the Civil Rights Act. We'll have the Dems on the plantation. We'll have them voting Democrat for the next 100 years, or blacks. We'll have the blacks voting Democrat for the, and he didn't use the word blacks, by the way. We'll have him voting. We'll have him voting Democrat for the next 100 years. It was clear that his job was to put the Democrats back on the plantation and keep them there for 100 years. Well done, Birdwell. Scott Johnson will go with the Democratic Party, Sullivan, and the Three Stooges. He's talking about the three judges that really, I thought, did a pretty weak job. Sue Sung is going to go with Jenny Durham, the mayor of Seattle, along with Chaz and the BLM. Card is going to go with Minneapolis City Council for disbanding the cops. And that's right, disbanding the cops. No more deliveries into the city of Minneapolis. Good luck, vendors, getting any products in that city now that you have no cops. No deliveries going there. Sisler TX is going to go with Jenny Durkin, Antifa, and anyone who took a knee. Absolutely correct. I like those three picks a lot. Jenny Durkin, Antifa, and anyone who took a knee. That's three really solid picks. Lori Holt is going to go with Jenny Durkin, the Court of Appeals, those clowns, and of course the race-baiting Dems and the media, stoking the flames of division. That's what they do best, Lori. Bonnie Doon Homestead is going to go with Trump for not taking down the rotten Reverend Clinton. Well, there's something to be said for that. Oregon Outback is going to go with all of us for engaging in hope porn. You may very well be correct, Oregon. I hope you're wrong. We may all be engaging in hope porn. That's absolutely true. Kate Tozzi is going to go with the Dems in the kente cloth. Yes, the kente cloth. That didn't age very well, did it? Jeanette Bateman will go with the Seattle mayor, Shaz, the BLM Shaz soy children, and of course Governor Inslee. No question about that. Ronnie DeMasters will go with Sullivan. Gregory Woolery will go with the Dems who want to destroy the historical proof of ties to Southern slavery. Yeah, I mean, they want to destroy our history. That's, you can't do it. You can tear down all the monuments and statues you want, rename all the streets and all the buildings you want. Not going to erase the history. Susan Lowell will go with the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkin. Moon Go Pie is going to go with Kendall Kennedy Rose Law Firm. Yes, along with Podesta, Blumenthal, and Halper. Yeah, that's a trio right there. Charlie Butler will go with himself for not appreciating the influence the demo rats have on the judicial system. Yeah, they completely have a big lock on the judicial system, especially in D.C., the District of Criminals. Sigma 61 will go with Mayor Durkin, Chaz, the Chaz Snowflakes. Ricky Ricardo will go with Jenny Durkin. Krabby 2 will go with Antifa. Antifa for Krabby 2. And Joe Christensen also going to go with Mayor Durkin. So, the tally is winning Dumbass of the Week for this week pretty easily. Going away with it is going to be Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle. Yes, that woman is truly a dumbass. I mean, she defines the word. I mean, you look up the word dumbass in the encyclopedia, it should just say Jenny Durkin. Number 2, BLM, Black Lives Matter. Yes, they are a communist organization committed to the defeat of capitalism. That would make them a dumbass in my opinion. And number 3 is a two-way tie between the kneelers and the demo commies. Yeah, and there's a lot of so-called Republicans in that kneeler crowd as well. That doesn't make me very happy. But there you go. Jenny Durkin, Dumbass of the Week, followed by BLM, and of course the tie for third between the kneelers and the Dems. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.